as you well know.
Yeah, we've been traveling the state quite a bit, so it's fun to go across Mississippi. And if you're from the coast like I am, or from North Mississippi, or from Central Mississippi, at the end of the day, we're all Mississippians.
Yeah.
We all want what's best for our families and for our communities. And yeah, we have some cultural difference from time to time, and that's okay. It's part of what makes us beautiful in Mississippi. But at the end of the day, look, we're all here for the same reason, and that's to do good and to love on our families and our communities.
Totally agree. Awesome. Well said. All right, so we just had municipal elections this past week. Anything of note from your office with respect to that? Go off pretty smoothly?
It did, and I love talking about this because I want Mississippians to know how engaged we are. We had over roughly 20 folks from our office in over 60 cities around the state going into precincts, making sure that the election laws were being followed. We had a few reports of things that were going on around the state, some that we jumped on, some that are more public than others that we've talked about, what's happening up in Lee County and Tupelo. And so different things that we saw and were able to observe and then bring that back. And it helps for a different reason than just the public understanding, hey, we're out there engaged. It also gives us that immediate feedback on the ground. How can we do this better? So I think it's great that our team gets out there and they volunteer, Gerard. I don't make them go. They come and say, hey, look, we want to be a part of this. So really appreciate our team across the board at Secretary of State's office. Just some good folks who love Mississippi and want to see some good things happening.
So you and I were talking, chatting a little bit before we came on the air about whenever there is impropriety that is discovered, reported, investigated, and so forth by your office. First, we got a couple of possible situations here that you guys are looking into, right?
That's
you
right.
About Lee County.
Yeah.
As an example.
Yeah, and it's important, you're right, about the process to educate Mississippians on how that works. So on our end, obviously we are out there looking at the precincts, what's going on, get reports all day long from across the state. Our phone lines light up, and our team does a wonderful job. Kyle Kirkpatrick, and he's the head of elections at the office, does a wonderful job, and Gabe and the rest of the crew. But the key thing is when we hear those things, we want to get to the bottom of it, because oftentimes people just talk. Okay, I heard this and I heard that. Well, that doesn't mean it happened. So we want to gather the facts, and then we engage with the prosecutorial side. So it's either the local district attorney or the attorney general's office.
Okay.
In the case up in Lee County right now, we've been talking to the district attorney up there, John Weddle, doing a fantastic job. So I want people to understand we don't have the authority to go after these folks. Now we can gather the information, we can hear all the tips and turn them over to the proper authorities, but at the end of the day, where the tire hits the road, that's where the prosecutors come in. So at the district attorney's office, or your municipal prosecutor could do it as well, your county prosecutor, or the attorney general's office. And
you don't submit and refer every report. You do some investigation. Your office does as well, right?
That's a great point. We had a guy down in Jones County last year, matter of fact, presidential. And he called and launched a couple complaints. And so I called the circuit clerk. I called everybody I could talk to gather the facts. Hey, what actually did happen here?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think he was a little upset with something that went on, but there was nothing wrong. They did their jobs correctly. He just thought maybe it looked a little different.
Sure.
And I appreciate him for calling us and saying, hey, heads up. Get the folks out there and find out what's going on, because the more folks that are paying attention, the more folks that are being engaged, that then call our office and say, "Hey, heads up."
Yeah,
that's better for us.
Yeah,
it's letting people know that we're going to hold the folks accountable, and we want to go after them.
Well, nothing better than citizens holding their own government accountable. Essentially, that's what's happening there.
That's what it's about.
In the process, you can't possibly have resources positioned at every precinct watching every vote. It's not possible. But when citizens are paying attention, if they see anything unusual, they report it to your office. And so the phones, I suspect, ring quite a bit on elections day. Do you staff additional for those days?
We do. We have folks from across the office that'll come in, and like our IT crew will listen in on phone calls.
Sure.
If something's going on in our precinct and they need immediate response, hey, what's happening with this machine? Or, folks that do want to call in and say, hey, I saw somebody within 120 feet of the precinct. Again, you get those calls all day long.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. So our staff responds to those quickly. If it's calling local law enforcement saying, hey, this is going on, we need you to go down there and help. Whatever it is, we want to be that resource that does plug in and say, hey, we're here to listen and we're here to respond to the degree that we can. And we always will do that.
Yeah. So it being municipal elections this past week, and this is the year for that, the way our system works and is structured, and it is for a number of states across the country as well. Wanted to get your thoughts on what seems to be kind of a trend in the voting tabulation process, a new approach known as ranked choice voting that we're starting to see take hold. I think in New York, America's biggest city, they had mayoral elections primaries this past Tuesday, and it's the first time that they've employed ranked choice voting. Do you see that getting any traction or any interest in Mississippi? From a municipal perspective, let's start with that.
Possibly, and I think one of the good things about that, and the way to kind of look at that is, as we've talked as conservatives, what works in one state may not work in another.
That's right, yeah.
So if you look at it from that perspective, maybe it is kind of a neat thing to try at a municipal level first, and if you're having success, if it makes sense, then hey, look, if it's working down there, then maybe it will work across the state. So yeah. I think that's a beautiful thing. At local level first, does it work? If not, then let's not bring it to the whole state. But
absolutely.
If it does, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think it's something that we can look at. I've got a great policy team that really digs into the weeds about, who's doing what's good. And that's the great thing about the 50 laboratories of freedom. What's working over here, let's take a look. Is that good for Mississippi? Is it not? So the beauty of federalism and making sure that we're studying what's happening in other states.
Let's keep it that way.
Amen.
That's what I mean. You're right. I mean, as you are touting its beauty, and I totally am on board with you on that. The concern, of course, we have, and you and I have discussed it many times, and we'll talk some more about it, is the push by Democrats in Washington to federalize the entire American elections process, so there would only be one laboratory, if you will.
That's exactly right. And obviously we're talking about HR1 and S1. And
yep.
At the end of the day, you can talk about the different facets of it, and we can dig into the pieces of it and what it's actually going to do. But at the end of the day, what you boil it down to is it takes the state's authority away to run their elections, period. Yeah. And so it is a one-size-fits-all. Hey, guys, this is how you're going to do it. It's a mandate from Washington, D.C., and I'm a big, obviously, conservative. I don't hide from that. But the best, ideas usually come when we work together as a team. Yeah. And unfortunately, what we've seen from D.C. is there is no team. It is completely slanted to the left.
One way.
If this thing were to pass, and thank the Lord it died on the House or on the Senate floor the other day, but if it were to pass, in my mind, the system would be so slanted in elections that would be really hard to win elections if you were a Republican. And I'm speaking as Secretary of State, as a nonpartisan individual. No, I am a Republican. I ran as a Republican. Yeah. But if you look at it from an objective perspective and understand what is in the bill and how it's slanted, you can't help but recognize that.
And they know that, and that's why they're pushing so hard for it. It's why it's listed and styled as number one of their bills.
That's right.
It's their top priority because they know that once we got power, we can do anything we want at that point, and that is absolutely the plan. Well.
Yeah, and we talked about this the other day with Senator Manchin coming out, and I actually praised him on public on Facebook, I think it was, Twitter somewhere, and appreciated his stance. And the more you look into that, and I think people need to know this, he was a former Secretary of State in West Virginia, so he understands elections. Be careful. I appreciate him coming out against it, but we've seen his compromise now, and it leads down the same road to a certain extent.
Showed a little chink in the armor.